Welcome to the Nourish to Thrive podcast, faith-forward, science-backed strategies for women who want more energy, less weight, and real answers. I'm your host, Tanya Pennington-Miller, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and functional blood chemistry specialist with a master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. If you're tired of feeling dismissed by your doctor, confused by your labs, and stuck in survival mode, you're in the right place. Here, we simplify the science, we get to the root, and we anchor it all in truth. Because God made your body to heal and thrive, not just survive. It just needs the right kind of support and less noise. Hello, my friend. Welcome into the Nourish to Thrive podcast. I'm so glad you're back with me today. Now, we are in week 3 of our peptide series. And if you've been here with me for the last 2 episodes, we've covered a lot of ground. So we started in episode 55 with the GLP-1 peptides. So we talked about the Ozempics, the Mounjaros, retatrutides. And I really just gave you my very honest and nuanced position on that entire class of peptides. And then in episode 56, we moved into the growth hormone peptides, ipamorelin, CJC-1295, sermorelin, tesamorelin. We even touched on MK-677. And we talked about how that category works with your body's own production rather than overriding it. So today we're going into the healing and repair peptides. So we'll be talking about BPC-157, TB500, KPV, GHK-Cu, which is the copper peptide. And then we'll talk about which combination people are calling the Wolverine Stack. So now my husband actually had a carpal tunnel surgery somewhere around 5 years ago. And going into it, we made the decision that we were going to utilize BPC-157 as part of his recovery protocol. Really, I made the decision and he went along with it, right? Like as he usually does when it comes to anything health and wellness related in our household. But I had done a lot of research on this peptide and I really believed in what the data showed, but seeing it play out in real life was so great. I mean, his recovery was genuinely remarkable. He's had several surgeries over the last 13 years that we've been together. I mean, this man, he rides motocross and he rides really fast and he's done it for many, many years. So there's a lot that has had to be worked on in his body. And this particular recovery was by far his best recovery that he's ever had. And I do want to be careful about over attributing things because, recovery from surgery, from every type of surgery you have is so multifactorial. But I will say that we were genuinely surprised about how well this one went. And BPC-157 was really a significant part of what we did differently compared to other surgeries. So by the end of this episode, I think you're going to understand why this category of peptides is really generating the kind of attention that it is. Okay, again, so far we've talked about 2 different types of peptides. So we started in episode 55 with the weight loss category. We went into episode 56, which is more of the performance and muscle building category. And today's category is going to be something different from those 2. So these are not peptides that are going to suppress your appetite or boost your metabolism or signal your pituitary. These are peptides that work at the tissue level. They help to support the actual repair mechanisms your body already has built in. Okay. And listen, your body already knows how to heal. It was designed to heal. What these peptides that we're going to talk about today do is they amplify and they accelerate what your body was already trying to do. They are turning up the volume on a process that already exists that God designed. And that in many cases has just been slowed down by age, by chronic stress, by hormonal change. Okay. So let's start by talking about BPC-157 because we just talked about it in my husband's recovery. And this one also is the one with the broadest range of application in this category. So BPC stands for body protection compound. And the 157 refers to the specific sequence of amino acids in this peptide. And here's something that I find pretty fascinating about this one is that it's derived from a protein that is naturally found in human gastric juice. And I think that helps to point to what this actual compound is designed to do. So your gut already produces a version of this compound because your gut is constantly dealing with damage and repair. BPC-157 is essentially a concentrated, stabilized form of that natural repair signal. So let's talk about what it actually does. I mean, I think it's really pretty significant. So BPC-157 is going to promote the formation of new blood vessels, which is called angiogenesis. And this is really central to why it accelerates healing. So, new blood vessel growth means more blood flow, which means more oxygen, which means more nutrient delivery to the injured tissue. Without adequate blood flow, like healing is going to stall. And this is one of the reasons that tendons and ligaments are notoriously slow to heal. Like they have a really poor blood supply to begin with. So BPC 157 directly addresses that limitation. And if you've ever had an injury, to a tendon or a ligament, you know firsthand how long they take to heal. So it also modulates nitric oxide signaling in a way that reduces inflammation and helps to promote tissue repair. And it's been shown to accelerate healing of tendons and ligaments and muscles and even bone. So there's also this second piece to it, and it's a gut healing piece, which I think is going to be particularly relevant to a lot of women listening right now. BPC 157 has some of the most compelling research in the peptide world, specifically for gut healing. So we're talking intestinal permeability, which you may know as leaky gut. We're talking inflammatory bowel conditions. We're talking the kind of gut dysfunction that shows up as chronic bloating, unpredictable digestion, and just that feeling like your gut is never fully settled no matter what you do. Now, one thing to know about BPC 157, and this is kind of different than a majority of peptides out there, but it's that it comes in two forms. So there's injectable and there's oral, and the form that you use actually matters for what you're trying to treat. The injectable form is going to go systemic. So this means that it's circulating through the body. It can reach tendons and joints and other tissues. The oral form is going to act more locally in the GI tract. So that one, that reason makes it specifically useful for gut healing. So if someone is using BPC 157 specifically for gut repair, the oral form may be the place to start. But if it's for a joint, tendon, or surgical recovery, then injectable is going to be the way to go in that case. Now, if the oral form is something that you're wanting to explore, Quicksilver Scientific makes a really good BPC 157 product. They use a liposomal nano emulsion delivery system. So what that means is the peptide is wrapped in tiny fat-based particles that help it to survive digestion so that it will absorb more effectively. And that's really important because most of the oral peptides are going to get broken down before they can even do their job. So Quicksilver Scientific is a brand that I really trust. And so I think this might be one that you would be interested in if you're dealing with gut issues. I should say unresolved gut issues. This is not a step one, okay? But if you've done a lot of the work, you've done a lot of the foundational work, then this could be, a more accessible entry point to get started with this, before going directly to an injectable route. Okay, so I will leave a link for you in the show notes. And as usual, it will be connected to a 10% discount. Okay, since we're on the topic of gut healing, let's move on to another peptide. This one's called KPV. KPV is a tripeptide, meaning it's made up of just 3 amino acids, and it's derived from a naturally occurring anti-inflammatory compound in your body called alpha MSH, okay, which stands for alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone. So what KPV does specifically is it inhibits one of the major inflammatory signaling pathways in your gut. And when that pathway is overactivated, which is often when we're dealing with chronic gut inflammation. It drives the kind of symptoms that just will not resolve no matter what it is that you do with your diet, no matter what you're doing with the foundational work. This can be things like persistent bloating, gut pain, irregular bowel patterns, and that feeling that your gut is just chronically inflamed and just so reactive to everything that you eat. So, KPV has some really compelling research specifically for inflammatory bowel conditions, and that includes Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And I mean, the results are significant enough that it's worth knowing about, even if you're not dealing with something so severe, because subclinical gut inflammation is something I see consistently in the women I work with. And it tends to be this underlying driver of a lot of other symptoms. And one of the things that makes this particular peptide, I think, especially practical is that it is actually orally bioavailable, which is pretty unusual for a peptide because, again, most peptides get broken down in the digestive process before they can even do their job. And KPV survives that process. And it acts locally in the gut, okay, which makes it a very targeted and accessible option. So how then does KPV compare to BPC-157 for gut healing? Well, they work through different mechanisms, which is actually why some people use both. So BPC-157 promotes repair and new blood vessel growth in the gut lining, okay, which is going to help to heal that tissue. And KPV directly suppresses the inflammatory signaling that's driving the damage in the first place. So one is repairing and one is reducing the fire that caused the damage to begin with. So together, they address gut dysfunction from two complementary angles. Okay. And again, Quicksilver Scientific also makes a combination product that has both BPC-157 and KPV together in one formula. So it also uses the nano emulsion delivery system that we talked about. So if you're dealing with gut inflammation specifically and you want both mechanisms working at the same time, that combination product is a pretty convenient and targeted option. So there will also be a link in the show notes for that for you. Okay, now BPC-157 and the peptide we're talking about next, which is TB500, are almost always talked about together. And there's actually a name for this combination that you may have already heard about, which is called the Wolverine Stack. And I'm going to explain exactly why they work so well together in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about what TB500 does on its own. So this is a synthetic version of thymosin beta 4, which is a protein that is naturally found in almost every cell in your body. And its job is to regulate cell building, cell movement, and differentiation. So this means that it's involved in how your cells organize themselves to form tissue and how they respond when that tissue is damaged. And what makes TB500 particularly interesting is that it works more systemically than BPC-157 does. So while BPC-157 is especially strong at the site of injury, TB500 circulates through the body and actively finds areas of damage and inflammation. So you think of it like a repair crew that can navigate to wherever the problem is. So TB500 reduces inflammation. It helps to promote new blood vessel growth like BPC-157 does. And it's been shown to support healing of muscle, tendon, ligament, and even cardiac tissue. There's actually some good research on its cardiac healing properties that is genuinely remarkable. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about that as that research continues to develop. So it also supports flexibility in tissue. And this is really important. That means that the repaired tissue tends to have a better range of motion and less scar tissue formation than it might otherwise have. And if you're dealing with, recovery of any kind from surgery or an injury, that quality of healing really matters just as much as the speed of healing does. Okay. So let's talk about what happens when you combine BPC-157 and TB500 together, because again, this is where the name the Wolverine Stack comes from. And it's named that for the kind of rapid and remarkable healing that this combination can produce, which if you've ever seen those movies, you know that, the Wolverine heals from serious injuries like almost instantly. And I do want to be clear that we're not talking about like superhuman healing here. Um, but the synergy between these two peptides being used together is real. So BPC-157 is particularly strong, again, at the local level. So it's going to work intensely at the site of injury, while TB500 is more systemic. So it is circulating to find and address the damage throughout the body. So together, they cover both of those dimensions at the same time. And the result tends to be significantly accelerated tissue repair and recovery compared to either one alone. So this stack is commonly used for post-surgical recovery, for chronic joint or tendon injuries, muscle tears, and just that inflammation that's been ongoing and unresolved. And we also sometimes see it used as a more intensive recovery protocol when people are training like real seriously and want to support that repair process between workout sessions. So now in episode 56, we talked about the growth hormone peptides, specifically ipamorelin and CJC-1295. And I'm bringing these up because sometimes people will add those into this stack as well. Because if you're using the Wolverine Stack for recovery and you also want to support the anabolic and regenerative environment more broadly, adding the ipamorelin and CJC-1295 gives you that growth hormone support layer on top, okay, of the local and systemic tissue repair that you're already getting. So then the stack becomes BPC-157, TB500, ipamorelin, and CJC-1295. If that conversation is new to you, go back and listen to episode 56 because we went really deep on how ipamorelin and CJC-1295 work as well. And then one more thing to mention here is that Quicksilver Scientific, the same brand we've been talking about for the oral BPC-157 and the BPC plus KPV combo, also makes a BPC-157 combined with TB500, again, using the same nanoemulsion delivery system. So if you're someone who is wanting the Wolverine Stack in a more accessible form, again, this is an option. This is an option for you to get started. So you'll have a link in the show notes for that as well. Okay, let's move on to the next peptide, which is GHK-Cu. Again, this is known as the copper peptide. And just like the growth hormone, this is actually something your body does produce naturally. It's found in your blood plasma, in your saliva, in your urine, and it plays a role in activating your body's own repair and regeneration systems. And also, like growth hormone, it declines significantly with age. So by the time that most of us are in midlife, we just have a lot less of it than we used to. So what does this particular peptide do? It promotes collagen synthesis, and it doesn't just deliver collagen to your skin, right? It's actually signaling your own cells to produce more of it, which is a really important distinction. It's going to help to support skin elasticity, skin firmness, and the kind of skin texture changes that a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause start to notice and find pretty frustrating. So it's also going to promote hair follicle health and has been studied specifically for hair thinning and hair loss. And I know this is something that comes up a lot with the women that I work with because hair changes in midlife, the thinning, the shedding, the texture changes. They're all really common and pretty distressing. And, they're connected to hormonal shifts that are happening. And the copper peptide just really helps to address this at the follicle level. Okay. It also has antioxidant properties, meaning it helps to neutralize free radicals that also contribute to cellular aging and inflammation. It has nerve regeneration effects, which makes it relevant for women dealing with neuropathy or nerve damage. And it has anti-inflammatory properties that support tissue healing more broadly. Okay. And one more thing worth knowing about is that this particular peptide can be used two ways. So we can use it topically, which we see in a lot of skincare products, a lot of over-the-counter products. And it can also be used as an injectable. And the injectable is going to be, of course, at a much higher concentration. And those concentrations, the systemic effects are on collagen, on hair, antioxidant activity, nerve regeneration. They're going to be much more significant than just at the skin level, right? With the topical. And again, Quicksilver Scientific has some really good options here as well. They have both a facial serum with a copper peptide, which is a really great entry point if skincare is your primary focus. And they also have a liposomal version, which gives you that same enhanced absorption technology that we talked about earlier, okay, for that more systemic effect. So those links will also be in the show notes for you. So for the woman who's dealing with skin changes, hair thinning, and the general tissue repair needs that come with this season of life, the copper peptide is a really compelling option and one that deserves, I think, a lot more attention than it generally tends to get. I do want to mention this as well. I know I'm speaking to women in all of my podcasts, but if you're listening to this and you're thinking of your partner, you're thinking of your husband and like, gosh, he could probably use, one or more of these are also fantastic for men. Okay. I have a habit of just talking to my ladies, but certainly, men really, really can benefit from these. Again, my husband used the BPC-157. So who are these peptides actually for? And how do you think about incorporating them? This category, I think, is the most relevant for men and women who are dealing with something specific that needs healing. That might be recovery from a surgery. It might be a chronic joint or tendon issue that's not fully resolved. It might be significant gut dysfunction. It might be the skin and the hair changes of midlife that just feel like they're accelerating faster than they should or faster than you would like for them to. Or it might just be, again, that active training recovery situation where your body is just not bouncing back the way it used to. Perhaps you've got the wild hair to try to run a marathon. Okay. So here's a few things worth knowing about these peptides. So for BPC-157, this is going to be kind of like a summary for you. BPC-157, the form really matters here. So if you're dealing with gut issues, oral is your starting point. If you're dealing with a joint, tendon, or surgical recovery, injectable is going to be the more effective route. And if you're doing both, some people will actually do both forms simultaneously. So that's a pretty legitimate approach as well. For the KPV, if gut inflammation is your primary concern, oral is going to be the right route since it acts locally in the GI tract. And if you're dealing with a significant gut dysfunction, using KPV alongside an oral form of BPC-157 is going to give you that complementary approach that we talked about. So one, reducing the inflammation, one, repairing the tissue. For the Wolverine Stack, these peptides are typically run in cycles rather than indefinitely, and the length of the cycle depends on what you're trying to address. So a post-surgical recovery protocol is, of course, going to look different from a chronic injury protocol. So this is exactly the kind of nuance that a practitioner who understands peptide therapy is going to be able to help you navigate. Okay. For the copper peptide, if skin is your primary goal, the topical products are going to be a great option for you, a great starting point. If you want the more systemic effects, the injectable is going to be a more powerful option. And of course, the injectable is also going to address skin, right? For all of these, the same guidance from last week applies. A functional medicine physician or integrative practitioner can prescribe the injectable versions through a compounding pharmacy, and that's always going to be the route that I'm going to point you toward. If you end up going through a research peptide vendor, I do want to make a quick correction from last week because in episode 56, I mentioned Peptide Sciences as a reputable source. And I have since learned that they have closed their doors. They're no longer available. So I just want to make sure that I make that correction. And when you are looking for a research peptide vendor, what you want to look for is third-party testing documentation that you can actually look at, because not all vendors are created equal, and that transparency is how you know the product is what it says it is. Okay. I also want to make this clear, utilizing these peptides should never be a first line of defense. These should only come after you have done the foundational work. You're looking for some extra help. But don't not focus on eating an anti-inflammatory diet and then go and, inject yourself with a peptide that helps with inflammation. Always, always, always start with the foundations first. Okay. And I do want to close with something that has been sitting with me as I've been putting these episodes together. So Jeremiah 30:17 says, "But I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord." And I think about that promise in the context of everything that we've been talking about, because what strikes me is not just the promise of healing, but the confidence behind it. Not like I might restore you or I'll try to restore you. Like he will restore you. It is declared. And I think there's something really meaningful in the fact that God designed your body with its own healing capability already built in. Like he did not just make a body that could be healed from the outside. He made a body that, given the right conditions and the right signals, reaches toward healing on its own. The body doesn't have to be convinced to repair. It already wants to. It's already oriented toward restoration. And I think that that's just worth sitting with wherever you are right now. Maybe you are in a season of recovery from something specific. Maybe you are carrying something that has been unresolved for a long time. Maybe you're simply paying attention to what your body needs and trying to figure out your next step. The promise of restoration is not contingent on which tools you have access to, or how quickly healing comes, or whether your body responds on the timeline you were hoping for. It's simply there. And the God who declared it knows exactly where you are, exactly what you are carrying, and exactly what your body needs right now. So trust that and just really give yourself permission to receive it. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. I mean, really, this whole series. And I really want you to come back next week when we're going to wrap up this particular series. We're going to be talking about thymosin alpha 1, which is an immune support peptide. Along with that, we're going to go into kind of a bigger, more philosophical conversation about the functional medicine community's enthusiasm around peptides broadly. We'll talk about where I think that enthusiasm is well placed and where I think we need to stay honest about what these tools can and cannot do. So I don't want you to miss that episode. So make sure you're subscribed. If this series is making you think seriously about the root cause picture in your own body, I would love for you to get on the wait list for my DNA Reset for Fat Loss Academy. Includes lab testing, a blood test, along with a DNA test kit. So I'm going to leave you a link in the show notes for that. Enrollment does not open again until early 2027, but being on that list is going to get you, the information in the meantime, and it puts you first in line for anything that I do open for enrollment. So thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I will see you right back here next week, sister. That's it for today on the Nourish to Thrive podcast. If you found value here, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or send it to someone who's walking a similar path. Keep showing up, keep asking questions, and know that healing is possible, especially when you trust the one who designed your body to heal. Until next time, stay rooted in truth and nourished in grace.